Grief. You know, it's one of those things that it just changes everything, doesn't it? It's this profound universal experience that reshapes your whole world. So today, we're going to try to understand it a bit better. We'll look at what it is, how it works, and maybe find some ways to navigate that really challenging terrain. All right, let's get into it.
Have you ever felt that feeling like you're somehow grieving wrong? So many of us do. You feel like your emotions are, I don't know, either too much or not enough, or just a total mess. And that confusion, that little voice judging yourself, it just piles on another layer of pain to something that's already so hard.
Okay, so right up front, I want to be really clear about something. This isn't a rule book. There's no magic fix for healing, because, well, one just doesn't exist. The goal here is to give you a guide for understanding. It's about validating all the different ways grief can show up in your life and maybe, just maybe, offering a few tools to help you carry that weight. All right, first things first. To really get our heads around this, we need to get our language straight. You'll hear a lot of words thrown around when we talk about loss, and honestly, they can get pretty tangled up. So let's take a second and clarify what we're actually talking about. Okay, so look at these three terms. They seem similar, but they're really different. Bereavement, that's the event. It's the objective fact that a loss happened. Then you have grief. That's your internal reaction. It's all the personal, messy, complicated thoughts and feelings and even physical sensations that happen inside you. And mourning, that's the external part. It's how you express that grief to the world, and that's often shaped by your culture, your family, your community. And this is so important. Grief isn't just about death, not at all. It can come from so many different kinds of loss. The end of a relationship, losing a job that was your identity, a major change in your health, or losing a beloved pet. We have to validate these kinds of losses. Giving yourself permission to grieve, no matter the cause, is absolutely the first step. Your pain is real and it is legitimate. I absolutely love this metaphor because it's just so true. Grief really is like waves in the ocean. It's not this nice, neat, linear process, not by a long shot. You can have days, even weeks, where the water feels calm and you think, okay, I'm okay. And then, out of nowhere, a massive wave hits you. And it can be triggered by a song, a smell, or sometimes nothing at all. That unpredictability, that's completely normal. Okay, let's talk about something I'm sure you've heard of. When people talk about grief, what's the one thing that always comes up? Yep, the 5 stages. But, and this is a big but, this famous model is probably one of the most misunderstood ideas out there. Right, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. We all know the list. And it's interesting, this model originally came from observations of people who were facing their own terminal illness, not from people who had lost someone. But over time, it's just become this cultural shorthand for how we think grief is supposed to work. But here is the absolute key takeaway. It is not a neat, linear sequence you have to check off. It's not a checklist. You don't pass anger to get to bargaining. You might feel all of them in one day. You might skip some entirely. You might go back and forth. And if you try to force your experience into these 5 little boxes, you can end up feeling like you're failing at grieving, which is just the last thing you need. So if the 5 stages aren't the roadmap we thought they were, then what is? Well, newer ways of thinking about grief see it as a much more fluid, dynamic process. Think of it less like a map with 5 stops and more like a flexible compass to help you find your way. This brings us to something called the dual process model. And the idea here is that healthy grieving involves swinging back and forth or oscillating between 2 different states. On one hand, you have the loss-oriented stuff. That's when you're focusing on the sadness, the memories, really sitting with the loss. But on the other hand, you have the restoration-oriented stuff. This is adapting to your new life, figuring out new routines, new roles. And here's the key. Taking a break from the intense pain to, say, pay the bills or go back to work, that's not you avoiding your grief. It's actually a necessary and healthy part of the whole process. And while we're talking about different types of grief, there's a really important one we need to address. And that's the kind of grief that often goes completely unseen. It's called disenfranchised grief. Basically, it's grief for a loss that society doesn't fully acknowledge or support. Maybe it's the loss of an ex-partner or a job that was your whole identity. When the people around you don't really get why you're in so much pain, it can be incredibly isolating. Okay, so knowing all this theory is one thing, but what do you actually do when you're right in the middle of it, when a wave is crashing over you? let's shift gears and talk about some practical, hands-on tools that can help you cope with the mental and physical toll. So let me ask you this. Have you ever heard of grief brain? If you've ever felt completely foggy, forgetful, like you just can't concentrate after a loss, I want you to know you are not alone. And you are definitely not losing your mind. It's a real thing. Yeah, grief brain is absolutely real. And it's so important to understand that this is a neurological experience. Your brain is under an immense amount of stress. It's working overtime trying to process everything. So that difficulty concentrating, that forgetfulness, that foggy feeling, that's a physical reality of grief. It is not a personal failing. Same goes for that deep exhaustion. It's real. So, where do you even start? You start with what some people call radical self-care. And look, we're not talking about bubble baths and spa days here. We're talking about the absolute basics. Just trying to establish simple routines for sleep and eating. That's it. These tiny, predictable actions can become a crucial anchor when everything else in your world feels like total chaos. And for those moments when a wave of emotion just feels completely overwhelming, here's a super simple technique you can use right away to calm your nervous system. It's called box breathing. All you do is inhale for a count of 4, hold your breath for 4, exhale slowly for 4, and then hold again for 4. Just doing that a few times can really anchor you in the present moment and send a signal to your body that it's okay to relax, just for a second. Of course, there are lots of other tools you can add to your toolkit. Journaling, for instance, can be a lifesaver. It's a private space where you can just dump all those chaotic thoughts without any judgment. Setting boundaries is huge. Learning to say no is not selfish. It's about protecting your energy. And trying to communicate your needs, gently but honestly, can help the people who love you know how to actually help. And please remember, seeking support from a therapist or support group, that's not weakness. That is an act of incredible strength. All right, so let's zoom out a bit. What's the long-term view here? What does it even mean to move forward? This leads us to the final part of our conversation, and honestly, it might just be the most important part of this whole journey, how we integrate loss and find a way to grow. And here is probably the biggest mindset shift of all. The goal isn't to get over it. That's just not how it works. Grief isn't a problem you solve. It's about integrating the loss into the very fabric of your life. It's about learning to live with it. Over time, that sharp, intense pain, it often does soften. The waves might not come as often or as powerfully, but the loss, it becomes a part of you, woven into the person you are now. And you know, there is something truly hopeful that can emerge from this. For some people, navigating a profound loss can actually lead to something called post-traumatic growth. Now, let's be crystal clear. This does not mean the loss was a good thing. It doesn't erase the pain for 1 second. What it means is that through the suffering, some people discover a deeper appreciation for life, or they find a new kind of personal strength they never knew they had, which really leaves us with this one last question, doesn't it? Can sorrow and growth actually coexist? The answer is yes. Grief isn't a simple equation where happiness eventually pushes out sadness. It's more like a dance. It's this profound, deeply human ability to hold both at the same time, to carry the heavy weight of sorrow in one hand while still finding the strength to build something new with the other. And that right there is an incredible testament to the resilience of the human spirit.